If any answer exists, it will have to be both economic and cultural. Restoring upward mobility should be viewed as an emergency. Part of what's contributing to all this zero-sum feeling is that it used to be the case that somebody from a working class family in the middle of the country could just through public education, rise, go to the coast, come back, there'd be this fluidity. Now it's too expensive to live on the coast. Education has transformed to this weird thing. You have to pay for tutors. It's almost impossible to get into these top universities. Those avenues have been closed off. At a time when China is very powerful and unified and extending its influence around the world, we in America, by contrast, are deeply divided along class, racial, and political lines, constantly ripping into each other. So, what do we do about this? What is the way forward? Obviously, there are no simple solutions. I began with talking about how tribalism is hardwired biologically into us. But I think that part of the answer lies in remembering what it is that makes America special, what it is that makes us different from almost every other country in the world, even the democratic countries of Western Europe. So, alone among the major powers, America is what I call a supergroup. Let me explain what I mean by this concept. It's really easy. To be a supergroup, you have to satisfy two simple conditions. The first is you must have a very strong, overarching national identity, like American, or China, capable of inspiring loyalty and patriotism. So that's the first condition. But to be a supergroup, you have to satisfy a second condition, and that is that you have to allow smaller individual subgroup identities, ethnic, religious, linguistic, racial, to also thrive. And at our best, that's America. America is a country where you can be Irish American, Syrian American, Japanese American, Mormon American, Jewish American, Cuban American, and intensely patriotic at the same time. And that may sound like old hat to you guys, but we forget just how rare that is. Almost no other country in the world is a supergroup, believe it or not. China, for example, is not. China is very powerful, but it's not a supergroup because it satisfies the first condition. It's got a really strong overarching national identity, but that identity is rooted in the ethnicity, in an ethnic Han identity. So China doesn't satisfy the second condition. Smaller subgroup identities like your Uyghurs or the Tibetans or all kinds of minorities, obviously their identities are not allowed to flourish. Now, believe it or not, even a Western democracy like France, which is so much like the United States in so many ways, it is also not a supergroup for the same reason as China. France has a very strong collective identity, but because of their almost forced assimilation policies, they call it laïcité, ethnic and religious minorities in France must thoroughly assimilate, at least in public. I'm sure you've heard about the ban on wearing religious symbols, the headscarf ban, the burkini ban. As the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy himself put it, if you want to become French, then you have to speak French, you live like the French. And many believed that such attempts at forced assimilation have backfired with France's Muslims and immigrants from North Africa, contributing to social unrest and radicalization. By contrast, the United States is a supergroup. And the good news here, and I also often think this is a false dichotomy I'm presented with, the good news is that we don't have to choose between having a really strong group-transcending collective identity and multiculturalism. We can have both. So I give a lot of talks around the country, at least before COVID, and I'm always asked the same question: is there another country that could serve as a model for the United States to learn from, to help us overcome our tribal divisions? And I always respond, no, there is no other country that's a better model. We are the best model. We are actually better situated than any other country in the world
because of the fact that our national identity is not rooted in blood, but rather in the principles of the US Constitution. This makes us different from most other countries in the world, including the countries of Europe that started off as, and in many ways still are, ethnic nations. The fact that our Constitution, that as a constitutional matter, our national identity is ethnically and religiously neutral, makes the United States, as a country, uniquely equipped to overcome the challenges of political tribalism. Having said that, we are at a perilous moment. America's status today as a supergroup is under tremendous strain because of the three factors I mentioned: this massive demographic transformation, social media, and the growing divide between urban and coastal elites and the rest of the country. So let me now offer three kind of concrete suggestions for how we can get back on the right track, or at least move in the right direction. First, I think we all need to be much more protective of America's special national identity. And this is a lesson that both the left and the right need to take to heart, although in completely different ways. On the left, I think progressives need to be aware of the danger in their scorched earth approach to America, its history, and its ideals. It is common among progressives now, especially younger ones, I hear it all the time at Yale, to hear America described as a land of oppression. It's a country founded on genocide. Many prominent prize-winning writers on the left routinely depict America as a country that is built on and structurally committed to white supremacy. But as I always tell my students, there is a huge world of difference between saying, on the one hand, that America has repeatedly and shamefully failed to live up to its own ideas and we must do better and try harder. There's a huge difference between saying that and saying that the principles supposedly uniting us are just bogus lies and smokescreens to disguise oppression. Because if America really is nothing more than a land of oppression, founded on nothing more than genocide and white supremacy, it's hard to see why America is worth fighting for. Unfortunately, there are equal dangers coming from the right. America cannot remain a supergroup if we start defining our national identity, for example, through our immigration policy, in terms of whiteness, or Anglo-Protestant culture, or Christianity, or any other term that is not inclusive of all colors and creeds. To do so would be a movement in the direction of ethno-nationalism, away from what it is that makes us special as a nation whose identity is rooted in principle and ideas, not blood. So that's my first suggestion. I think we all need to elevate ourselves and be much more thoughtful about what it means to have a strong American identity, true to our history. Second suggestion, I think we need to promote and experiment with concrete, practical initiatives designed to help Americans see each other as fellow Americans. Specifically, I think we really need to do some work to bridge the deep chasm between the coasts and the heartland that contributes so much to the mutual ignorance, disdain, and stereotyping that is everywhere. Specifically, I think that we should think seriously about having some kind of national service program for young people, maybe right after high school, where young Americans from one part of the country, say New York City or Los Angeles or Miami, are encouraged or maybe required to spend a year in another part, an unfamiliar part of America, interacting with young people whom they would normally never talk to, engaging in some sort of common project. And on this point, I am so proud and happy to be here today because I think that the rest of America can take a page from the missionary program of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I understand, of course, that the Mormon mission is first and foremost an experience of religious consecration and sacred service. But at the same time, it's also a wonderful example and a successful example of an experience of civic engagement in which Mormons from one country, say the United States, live and interact with people from completely different ethnic, cultural, and linguistic backgrounds in a way that opens one's eyes and broadens one's perspective. I have been told that approximately 75% of BYU students speak a second language, and that is so astounding and so impressive. And I've also been told that many of you have already served out of the country on 2-year ecclesiastical missions. And I think that is so impressive and inspiring and something I think that the rest of the country can and should learn from. My third and final suggestion has to do with education and civics. America's changing. There's no going back. We are in a period of renegotiating and rediscovering our collective identity. We are struggling to arrive at a national identity that is capacious enough to resonate with and hold together as one people Americans of all sorts, old and young, immigrant and native-born, urban and rural, descendants of slaves as well as descendants of slave owners. So to that end, I think we need to think very hard about how we can teach our children U.S. history in a way that tells the truth while still conveying the idea of America as a special nation. It is really important that we no longer teach our children a whitewashed version of American history. But I think it's also important not to overcorrect, which is, I worry, we are now doing. I recently gave a talk in New York City, and a history teacher at a super fancy elite private high school told me, really in despair, that most of his incredibly smart students now express total disdain for the founding fathers. They're just dead white male slave owners. At the University of Virginia, in 2016, the president of the university quoted Thomas Jefferson, that's the school's founder, in an email to students. In response, 469 students and faculty signed an open letter declaring that they were deeply offended at the use of Thomas Jefferson as a moral compass. I think that is a terrible problem. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were slave owners, but they were also political visionaries who helped give birth to what became the most inclusive form of governance in world history. To conclude, America is an aspirational nation. Our ideals have always far exceeded reality. The American dream is a promise of freedom and hope, but it is also a call on all of us to make true the myths that we tell ourselves about what America has always been. The poet Langston Hughes captured this powerfully in his 1935 poem, which is called "Let America Be America Again." And this is how I'd like to end, because I also think it fits perfectly with the theme of becoming a beloved community again. So I will just read a small snippet of this poem and then conclude. So it's a really creative poem, and it's got two voices that go back and forth. The first voice is very hopeful. So it begins, "Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love. But then a second voice answers. It says, it never was America to me. And then the first hopeful voice replies, say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And the second voice answers, I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the black man bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. But far from concluding with defeat, Langston Hughes offers a prayer and an affirmation and ends this way. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be the land where every man is free. Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be.